Thank you for downloading from Ravi Zacharias International Ministries. Support for this podcast comes from your generous gifts and donations. You can find out more about Ravi Zacharias and the team at www.rzim.org.
The whole arena of hope is the arena in which the Christian lives and moves and has his being, where God can look at you tonight and look at me tonight and say, because I live, you shall live also.
Every day we're confronted with headlines of heartache and tragedy. We've heard of the poem Paradise Lost. Well, that title seems to be more appropriate each day. But did you know there's another side to the story? This week on Just Thinking, Ravi has been sharing some powerful insight based on the scriptural story of the thief who was crucified next to Christ, a man who would have been beyond hope if it wasn't for the grace of God. In the first part of his message this week, Ravi shared 3 realizations that opened the thief's heart to God. Today, we'll hear what Christ gave him in return. Here's Ravi with the conclusion of his message titled, Paradise Regained.
This thief was accepted. Secondly, he was forgiven. He was forgiven. The whole story of the cross is the taking of the punishment upon his own body and freeing the person who was guilty in order that they could walk away. Let me give you the quick illustration on this, and my last point will be brief. When I was in Phnom Penh, I went to see a play. I didn't understand any Cambodian, but I decided to take a Cambodian interpreter with me and asked him if he translated for me. He'd done some work for me while I was there. It was a fascinating play. The Oriental people give a lot of pathos in their plays. Let me quickly summarize it for you. It was too long. I'll just give it to you in a nutshell. A young farmer and a young girl get married, and they're dressed up in all of their grandeur of the wedding. She's got all the gold colored dresses and all of that, and they're dancing across the stage, symbolizing complete happiness. He is carefree. He's won the girl of his youth, as it were. He is so proud that he has won the right to love her and be married to her. The prince comes with his horde of soldiers, looks at the girl, is attracted to her, talks to one of his soldiers. The girl is whisked away and taken away and is going to the palace to be a part of the harem of the prince. The young farmer doesn't know how to handle this. He goes to face the king. He will really be beheaded for it, for challenging the right of the king in this way. But he figures he'd sooner lose his head than lose this which he so dearly loved. And he goes over to the palace and he says to the king, your son just came and snatched away my wife from me. We'd been married a few hours and he's taken her away from me. And the king says, what arrogant person are you to dare to come into the palace and accuse the prince of this kind of a thing? He says, I'm going to have your head in a moment, but just to be sure I'm doing the right thing, I'm going to call the prince and the girl and ask her to tell you whose wife she really is. In the meantime, they've told the girl that if she claims to be the wife of this man, they will kill him, and her only hope to see him alive was to deny that she was married to him. So the girl comes, lovingly looks at him and looks at the king and says, no, that man is not my husband. This prince is my husband. I do not know who that man is. The man is completely dejected, forlorn. He doesn't know what to do, and he's on the verge of complete collapse when a Buddhist priest stands up and he says, King, there's something strange about this story. A peasant man wouldn't come into the palace unless he were anchored with the truth, and I think your son is denying the truth here, and I have a perfect plan to find out who's telling the truth. I have a magic syrup here. If both of them will drink it, 10 minutes later, involuntarily, they will state the facts, and we'll find out what the truth is. And both of them are subjected to take that particular serum. So the serum is given to both of them, and then the priest says, look, why don't you both take 5 minutes alone with that girl, go away into a solitude where you can talk to her, but you cannot come into contact with one another. And he says, I'm going to separate you by a huge huge barrel of a drum, 2 rings on top of that drum, and a huge rod going through it. You are to carry one end of it. She is to carry the other end of it. Go into seclusion for a few minutes. Talk to each other. No contact of any kind. So beautifully, the actual husband takes the whole weight of the barrel as best as he can to keep her from carrying it. They move away into seclusion, and she tells him, the reason I lied is because I dearly loved you and did not want you lost and have you beheaded by the king. Their 5 minutes are over. They come back. The prince brazenly takes it, slides that barrel over for her to carry the weight, moves away into seclusion, and says, if you continue to claim that he is your husband, we will have him killed. I want you to lie, so on and so forth. And they come back, and the priest says, the 10 minutes are over. We're now going to find out who was telling the truth. And both of them feel completely in control of their senses. Neither of them know what's been happening. A little boy's been hiding in the barrel, making notes of the conversations. And the drum suddenly cracks open, and the little boy comes out, hands the piece of paper to the priest, and he says, this is what the two of them said, this is what the prince and she said. When the priest reads it, he says to the king, your son's the liar. She's married to that man. I wish the story ended there. But we don't do it that way. In the East, we like to send everybody away brokenhearted. The prince stands up and says that little boy is in cohorts with the priest is in cohorts with the peasant, so they're going to kill the priest, they're going to kill the little boy, they're going to kill the man. The woman pulls out a hairpin and stabs herself to death, and that's the end of the story. I said, good grief, I wished I'd left 5 minutes before it ended. And as we were walking away, this is a non-Christian interpreter. I said to him, I like that story, except for the last 5 minutes. I said, what do you think was missing in that story? Fascinating was his answer in 2 words. He said, a savior. Somebody who could have taken up the cause of the right and defended it. Well, folks, we got a better than that savior who is able to take the punishment of the guilty and let the guilty man go free. In his acceptance and in his forgiveness, this thief found out what Christ was all about. And lastly, he received the hope for a better world. He was told that today he would be with Christ in paradise. The whole arena of hope is the arena in which the Christian lives and moves and has his being, where God can look at you tonight and look at me tonight and say, because I live, you shall live also. In 3 days, thousands of pilgrims will be walking through the streets of Jerusalem, and you and I will be greeting that sunrise morning on Easter, one of the most beautiful mornings of any morning that has ever dawned. And I think there's something so symbolic in those sunrise services as we rise up to see that early morning hour with the bright glory of the sun. The only thing I can do and put myself emotionally in the feet of Peter. Lord, you're not going to die. They're not going to do that to you. And yet when he saw him being smitten by the soldiers, when he saw him being spat upon, when he saw him being mocked, the book of Matthew says they all sat there and watched him. The whole process of pain, which was the process of scourging, the Romans called it halfway death. I urge you to take an encyclopedia and look at the word scourging in the Roman times. Here's what they'll tell you. A Roman soldier, muscle-bound, called the lictor, would take a huge whip ended with jagged edges. He'd pour that whip onto the body of Jesus, peeling back flesh and blood with every whipping. And as that body was being pummeled into humiliation and ignominy, as insolence was beating him, as irreverence was beating him, as indifference was beating him, and as they were punishing that mortal body of Jesus, Peter, almost in frustration, swore and said, I didn't know him. That's not the Christ I knew. There's more than merely a denial, I think, of the person of Christ. I think he's angry that he feels something's not right. I've been betrayed. And that's why I think it is significant after the resurrection when Jesus reminds this person, go and tell the disciples and Peter, because Peter, I think, had that special knitting of the spirits with Jesus, as Jesus had that tremendous affection for him, took him up to the top of the mountain where only 3 were able to behold that marvelous transfiguration. He was one of those who said, I'm going to go with you right up to death. And Jesus said, you're going to deny me before that cock crows. He is the one to whom Jesus said, Satan has sought to sift you, but Simon, that you, by the way, is plural. He sought to sift you all. But Peter, I prayed for you. So that after that resurrection, his massive body is hurling away. He wants to run. And I don't think it is accidental that Peter is ultimately crucified upside down. My feeling is if they gave him a choice of being crucified, he would have asked to make it upside down because he was not worthy to die like his Lord. But that resurrection motif, that conquering of the dead, that rising again, that new hope, and all the disciples then gather around. 11 out of the 12 of them died a martyr's death. John's the only one who was rescued from a cauldron of burning oil and lifted to the Isle of Patmos so he could see that magnificent revelation and talk of all these grand scenes that eternity will be unfolding for you and for me.
Paul wrote in Romans chapter 3, verse 23, that all have sinned and fallen short of the glory of God. None of us could spend eternity with Christ were it not for his love and grace. But he offers true hope and redemption to each one of us. And as the story of the thief on the cross proves, it's never too late to turn to God, no matter what choices you've made. We hope this message has encouraged you, and if you'd like to purchase a complete copy, call us at 1-800-448-6766. You can also order online at rzim.org. Or if you're listening in Canada, that website is rzim.ca.
From July 24th to July 27th, Refresh, Ready for College, is back for its second year at the Zacharias Institute in Atlanta, Georgia. As students, you know what it's like to be surrounded by questions. Questions about the world, questions about how to live, questions about faith. It can be easy to feel overwhelmed. How can you answer the questions and objections of your friends and classmates? We want to give you the space to think through some of the toughest challenges to Christianity. This year's program will be packed with high-energy talks from Ravi Zacharias and the RZIM Global Speaking Team. So if you're a student in high school or headed to college, don't miss this important week. Register now at rzim.org/refresh, and we'll see you at the Zacharias Institute on July 24th.
The vision of RZIM is built on 5 pillars made up of evangelism, apologetics, spiritual disciplines, training, and humanitarian support. We strive to fulfill the mandate of 1 Peter 3:15, to set apart Christ in our hearts as Lord, and always be prepared to give a reason for the hope that is within us, with gentleness and respect, all for the glory of God. To learn more about our ministry, be sure to visit our website or call us. Thank you for your prayers and financial support as we strive to help the thinker believe and the believer think. Just Thinking is a listener-supported radio ministry and is furnished by Ravi Zacharias International Ministries, Atlanta, Georgia.